Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today. I am Rakhi, and today I'm going to talk about, for next 5 minutes, I'm going to talk about components of browser. So before I jump into the components of browser, just a bit about myself. I am Rakhi Sharma, and I'm working at Delivery Hero in Berlin, and I'm working here as a software engineer, mostly focused on front end, but I am a full stack developer. But anyway, let's jump into our talk. So as we see on this screen, these are the 7 components of the browser. If you ever Google about the architecture of the browser, you will see this exact diagram with all these components. So in the next 5 minutes, I'm just going to cover all the components in a quick way, and I hope you get an idea about what all these components are about. So when we talk about user interface, I know some of you might be familiar with some of these components, or at least have heard of it, because as a front-end developer, you deal with user interface, interpreters, and everything. And as a backend, you also deal with networking and database. So yeah, let's start with user interface first. When we talk about user interface in the browser, the one thing that comes to our mind is, okay, I opened the browser, and whatever I see on the UI is user interface. But let me tell you here, that's not completely correct. When you open a browser, you see a lot of things: the window and the URL bar, the backend forward button, the tabs, and everything. But not all of them are the part of user interface. When I say not all are the part of user interface, that means it is not getting rendered from front end. Some of them are getting rendered from backend. And I will come to this backend part in the later component where we are talking about UI backend. So for example, when we talk about user interface, what are the user interface? The URL bar, the address bar, the forward and backward button, the hamburger menu button, the bookmark button, the tab button, the cross sign on the tab button where you close your tabs. Those are the components that belongs to the front end, and that is getting rendered from the front end side. So that was the quick intro for the user interface. Next point is browser engine. But before we talk about browser engine, let's skip it for a bit so that we can understand it better. Let's skip it right now and let's go to rendering engine. I will come back to the browser engine for sure. So when we talk about rendering engine, what is exactly happening? Just in simple ways, rendering engine is just rendering your UI, rendering your HTML, CSS to display it on UI. When we talk about rendering engine, it is just about rendering your HTML and CSS, or let's say parsing your HTML and CSS HTML, CSS, and it will just parse it. It will do a lot of syntax analysis, lexical analysis, and then it will show it on the UI. So when we talk about rendering engine, you can say it just displays the UI on the user interface, the UI of your website or whatever you searched on the browser. It will just display in the user interface. But now I am talking about it will parse the HTML, CSS of the website. But who is telling rendering engine about what user has requested? Here we go back to the browser engine. That's what browser engine is doing. Browser engine is simply telling the rendering engine that, hey, rendering engine, user has requested for this website, right? And then it will go through all the layers where the HTML and CSS parsing will happen. We will go back to the networking part. That is the next part. As we all know, we all know a bit of networking, and I'm not going to deep dive into networking here, but let's close this part by just saying network calls. All networking here is doing is network calls. You requested something on the UI, it will do your HTTP and HTTPS request. But then it comes to JavaScript interpreter. When we talk about rendering engine, I say, okay, this is going to just parse your HTML, CSS, but website have more than HTML, CSS. What about JavaScript interpreter? So as you already guessed in your head, JavaScript interpreter is going to execute and render your JavaScript. But now you have your JavaScript rendered and you have your HTML, CSS rendered too. Next is UI backend, but what exactly is UI backend? This is confusing word, UI backend. So now, when it comes to UI backend, let's go back one step back, and you open the browser and you see something. You type something on the URL. Let's say you typed google.com, and it shows a result in the window. imagine that window. That window is something that is getting rendered from UI backend. That is not part of user interface. Yes, the URL bar is part of your user interface that is getting rendered from front-end side, but the window you see on the browser is part of UI backend, and it is getting rendered from backend. So we talked about, all this small stuff like user interface, rendering engine, networking, interpreters, and all. But when we talk about browsers, something is still missing, right? I mean, I'm on browsers. I am browsing. I save files. I deal with local storage, and I deal with file systems. I also deal with like a lot of mechanism where it comes to saving the data. I also download files, but where all this stuff is going? Yeah, as you might have guessed in your head, it is all part of data persistence. All the cookies, all the local storage part, all of these are part of data persistence. And my friends, this is all about the browser components for now.